Next, we would like to hand the stage to Katarina Wojna, Compliance Officer for Southeast Mediterranean and Eurasia at Ericsson. A certified legal and compliance professional with 10 years of experience in Europe and Central Asia, she's deeply familiar with the US FCPA, UK Bribery Act, EU compliance laws, as well as US, EU and UK sanction regimes. She has solid experience in dealing with the US DOJ and SEC monitoring mission as part of an FCPA settlement, lectures on whistleblowing, and regularly speaks at compliance conferences. According to Katarina, we are constantly working towards the highest level of compliance. But without common sense and a culture of integrity, which people really believe in, it won't be possible to succeed in practice.
Good morning, everyone. My hometown, as well as 22% of the territory of Ukraine, are currently occupied by Russia. I and 8 more million people have no chance to return home today whenever we want. It means that war has changed our lives. However, war changes not lives only of people, but as well lives of the businesses, countries, continents. My name is Katarina Wojna, and I'm responsible compliance officer for Southeast Mediterranean and Eurasia at Ericsson. However, today I'm going to speak in my personal capacity and not on the company behalf, and I would like to discuss with you how in this crucial reality the compliance is changing and what we should pay attention to stating that we are compliant. The war has broken a lot of lives, businesses, supply chains. Import and export will never be the same again. And the center of the catastrophe, unfortunately, appears on the map almost every month. Let me share with you just a few of the examples. Earthquakes in Turkey and Syria, then floodings in Libya or Slovenia, war against Ukraine, now Israel. Unfortunately, we can continue this list. So from the first glance, it may seem that the war is just 1,400 kilometers of the front line. However, in fact, it encircles the world because it changes how people live, eat, do businesses. For example, Ukraine and Russia used to be the greatest exporters of the grain to the Middle East and Africa. And these days, now these supply chains are broken. Businesses are in search for new models, and people are in search for new places to live. The World Health Organization has announced that we have the biggest migration wave after the Second World War. So basically, there are really many changes right now happening in the geopolitics and every different segment as well. Let's take as well sanctions for Russia, for a number of Chinese vendors, changes in the defense segment. Some countries are considering entering NATO, some already did. So we definitely can see that many aspects, such as geopolitics, people, energy, climate, you name it, are definitely impacted by the war. So how do all of these things relate to compliance, you probably would ask me. So compliance used to be a set of written rules described in the Code of Conduct. And as the world has changed, compliance should change along with it. It is not just a written rule anymore. It goes far beyond. Intangible things. It shows the values that speak louder than the words, and every day challenges our ethics and values in practice. So I would like to share with you today my observations. Where do I see the most significant changes when it comes to the impact of compliance from the war? So for the past decades, a number of businesses considered and perceived compliance as a part of the normal corporate culture, right? But today, it becomes much more impactful, much more intangible. It has a global meaning. It's not just a book with the written regulations anymore. It really asks us to act properly. So nowadays, we show how values works in action. And recently, I was really badly impressed with the behavior of one of the international companies. And this is just one of the examples of the thousands of the companies that are still operating in Russia. I'm not going to share with you the name, but you can easily guess it. So last year, this company has announced termination of advertising and beverages production in Russia. However, a few months later, it resumed its production under the different name. So basically, how did it end up? On September 21st, 2023, the Russian missile hit the plant of the same company in Ukraine. For me, it really looks like two different realities. In one reality, the company continued paying taxes and financing the war. In another reality, civilians and the same companies are suffering from it. An interesting thing is that this company has the same code of conduct, which is applicable for every employee through entire the world. And let me quote it. It says, "One of the key behaviors way is acting with integrity in everything we do. And while a culture of integrity and ethics takes years to build, it takes just a moment to lose. So that culture cannot be taken for granted. We must invest in it day after day, year after year. And as a global business, the company is also committed to complying with the laws of the countries where we operate. Global laws and regulations are complex. However, following our code and policies will help you to ensure compliance with applicable local laws and ethics." Sounds reasonable, won't you agree? I think so. But does it really work in practice? So trend number one is from compliance to ethics. What values really drive the companies and crises, and we are definitely going far beyond just the written rules. However, we have another example where actions speak louder than the words, and these actions are called sanctions. So, we have some problem with the slides. So the other thing is related to sanctions. These days, Russia is one of the most sanctioned countries in the world, with more than 14,000 of sanctions entities and individuals as well. So basically, it's currently very important for the companies to make sure that they are following these sanctions regimes and that their due diligence is really thoroughly done and focused on the not only high-level shareholdings, but as well on the real UBOs. So these days for the companies, it's really crucially important to make sure that you have enough policies and procedures in place to monitor these activities, that you have another policies that can help you to make use of the tool set and properly identify if there are any connection to any sanctioned individuals, whomever. But on top of that, of course, it's important that you need to focus not only on the company itself, but as well you need to check the entire supply chain. Also focusing on joint ventures, customers, end users, distributors, agents, you name it. So these days, there is a very good proverb which says that the man is known by the company he keeps. And I believe this is exactly the way that we should pay attention to following the applicable sanctions regimes. And actually, earlier this year as well, the Deputy Attorney of the Department of Justice, Lisa Monaco, reiterated that sanctions are becoming a new FCPA. So basically, the Department of Justice of United States currently is pouring more resources into enforcement of the sanctions, and we need to be very careful about that, because they did exactly the same 20 years ago when it comes to US Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and afterwards enforcement was growing. So basically, the second trend is that growing enforcement and development of the sanctions regime. And if sanctions seem to be very hard and stiff, the next topic is more or less a little bit flexible and vague. And this is what we call ESG. So of course, we all know what are these letters stand for. Environmental, social, government, right? But just a few years ago, it seemed that we have a very precise targets when it comes to ESG. For example, stop carbon emissions by 2050, defend human rights and child labor. However, today, it has converted into the process of constant reassessment. Rules are determined by the reality. And these days, like a few years ago, it was hard to find certain investors that would like to invest into defense and security segments. However, these days, investors are really revising their approach and viewpoints to the firms that improve countries' abilities to defend. And on top of that, a clear set of principles for integrating human rights into investment policy is also currently urgently needed. In this and likely in many other ways, the war in Ukraine unfortunately has complicated the ESG investing. This could have significant consequences for the sustainable development plans, especially if environmental and social considerations are pushed into the background under pretext of the war. On top of that, climate change justice is also not a new thing, of course, but it again becomes more relevant under the pretext of the war, because the war has led to the increased prices not only in energy, but as well when it comes to food. In fact, by disturbing food supplies from Russia and Ukraine, the war threatens global food security. So basically, ESG is no longer a bright goal, it is a changing process. So trend number 3, which I would like to emphasize, is that ESG must be more holistic and detailed and requires constant reassessment. And last thing that I would like to note is related to charitable contributions or charitable donations. This thing was always part of the normal, good, developed, robust ethics and compliance program. However, usually it was used mostly for the certain marketing activities, advertising, you name it. So even 2 years ago, it looked like periodical, not common, but still greatly reflected in the media activity. But today, it really shows how do we share our values, how do we care, and what is our attitude. There are companies where monthly donations are included in the P&L. For us, Ukrainians, it has become an ordinary thing, unfortunately. But not only in the context of the war. Not only the war speeds up the process, also earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, they all turn into donations at the end, usually. So basically, these days, even charitable organizations constantly run in the risk of not receiving donations, but as well even choosing a well-known organization, for example, such as Red Cross, could not always give you 100% reliability of way of going forward. Because it's important for everyone to verify for the companies to make sure that you have as well relevant mechanism in place to protect the risks. Because such a great an intention, unfortunately, can turn into something bad. So basically, I would recommend that it's really important these days because this practice is becoming more and more common to verify end-to-end transaction. And of course, important to start with the relevant policies and processes in place, first of all, to define your framework, what are your targets, what are your goals when it comes to charitable contributions or donations. So yeah, a few things probably that would be good to consider. First thing, check if you have relevant policies in place that protect you from the risks. Of course, you need to check who are the end receivers, right, recipients of your donations, and the UBOs on the way to it. Sometimes it could also be some connections to the sanctioned individuals or specifically to public officials or politically exposed persons, because sometimes even if there is no connection to sanctions, still there could be quite often, especially unfortunately in Ukraine, it could be like that there are some exposures to the public officials. So another thing would be, of course, very much appreciated is to make sure that you have a proper contractual setup, that your contract is covered by anti-bribery and corruption provisions, and you definitely have all of this risk covered as well on the paper. And last but not least, probably, you need to verify whether you have a dedicated TL accounts in your books and records, and of course, make sure that you have collected the evidences that your effort was really made use for purpose. So this was another thing. So trend number 4, which I want to emphasize, is that donations became a part of a regular corporate social responsibility and require proper compliance assessment. So yeah, at the end, let me probably sum up the 4 things that I have noted today. First thing, from compliance to ethics, from written rule to the real values. What values do really drive companies in crisis? We are definitely going far beyond than just a written rule. Second thing was increased development and enforcement of sanctions regime. The first one was continuous reassessment of development of ESG, and the last one was related to donations, that they are becoming part of a regular corporate social responsibility and require proper compliance assessment. So all in all, in the end, I would like to say that we can conclude that crises, war, catastrophes bring compliance to the whole different level. A level where the code of conduct is not enough. A level where the 5-year-old rule is not working anymore. A level where a human determines what is right and what is wrong. And I really want that we will do a really right decision, because nowadays we live in this very changing environment where many bad things are happening on a regular basis. So let's take our responsibility. Let's start with ourselves and do the right thing. Thank you so much.